Okay, are we ready to get started? Do you think?
Ready.
Yes, ready? Okay. Well, I guess we have over 20 attendees. Thank you for joining, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Kratz from the Jewish Link. Thank you for being here. In partnership with the Kornitzer Family Law, proud to welcome you to our first ever online panel and a dialogue entitled Insights and Complexity, a dialogue on Jewish marriage and Halacha. So we've brought together a noted, beloved rabbi, a veteran psychologist, and a family law attorney who are all intimately involved in their own distinct, specific ways in Jewish marriage and its complexities. Just to introduce the panelists, we welcome Rabbi Chaim Howard Jachter. He is the Av Beit Din of Elizabeth, and he's literally the guy to know if you have any questions about a get in the state of New Jersey and in quite a lot of other places as well. He's very well, and also a noted expert in Eruvim, as I know and many others know as well. So he's not only Gittin, he's got several Masechtas under his subject matter expertise. He's also the rabbi of Sha'arei Orah congregation in Teaneck and an instructor at Torah Academy of Bergen County. We welcome Dr. Edward Berger. He is a veteran psychologist and therapist in private practice who has worked with and counseled hundreds of couples, individuals, and families over the years. And of course, we welcome our collaborator and sponsor, Robert Kornitzer of Kornitzer Family Law. Robert is an attorney with decades of experience in family law, and he represents one of the leading local law firms in this field with a particular interest and level of expertise in the intersection of secular law and halacha. So with that in mind, let's get started with an introductory question, and we will also open to questions from the group at the end of the presentation. And I'm going to start by asking the first question, which we put together. And I guess first we just have to ask to all of you, and we're going to start with Rabbi Jachter, I hope. How has the profession and your work specifically in all your individual ways changed due to the coronavirus pandemic and COVID-19's sort of shutting down of a lot of usual areas of communication? How has your relationship with your clients, patients, congregants changed in this pandemic?
I've just one quick notice is just that I'm not the Av Beit Din of Elizabeth. That's my ties. You should prefer many years.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You should be the Av Beit Din. I'm just a member.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm a happy associate. 30 years, but a very happy associate. So I would just say one thing is, I think one word really captures since what's the relationships and the change because of COVID, and that is flexibility. If we're flexible, we're nimble, then we're able to cope better. And I'm able to personally with the congregants, calls, emails, texts, and Zoom. It's just so many. We're versatile. We're nimble, and it's just opened up many more avenues of communication. No doubt, it's improved the communication.
Dr. Berger, has that been your experience as well?
Yes, actually, it makes sense that ideally I would like to talk to somebody person to person. This way I can get to see their body language, the vibes that we get off each other. So that is the downside. But I happen to think that in the long run, teletherapy is here to stay because there are many real pluses. The first plus is you can access a therapist anywhere in the state of New Jersey, which you couldn't do if you lived in Northern Jersey and needed a therapist. Secondly, it is so easy. You don't have to commute. You can have your children home upstairs and you can still see your therapist. Also, interestingly, there has been some research done on this field before COVID-19, and they have found that a very significant percentage of people are perfectly happy doing it this way and are not at all concerned that they're not coming face to face. So I think it's here to stay and it works.
Robert, would you like to?
Well, for me, I'd have to divide it into two parts: what happens in the court system, and then what happens individually with clients. In the court system, right now for family court, there are no personal appearances. We are never in court. I don't like that as far as, and I apologize, my power is going in and out if I back on over here. But I think it's important ultimately to be in a court for litigants to see the judge to see litigants. If there's going to be determinations of credibility, you need to look the person in the face. The judge needs that. That's what they're best at, really, determining credibility. So that part of it remains to be seen, because we're not going to be in a courthouse this year. That's for certain. I like the personal interaction with people, because you're there, you're looking at them, they're looking at you. Body language is very important in this business. Settlement conferences are very important to have with everybody there together in the same room. You look at each other, you can weigh each other. There's a lot of visual cues you pick up when you're meeting with people. The communication is fine. I mean, certain parts of what's going on in the court now is actually much more efficient and beneficial for clients. Routine procedural conferences we take care of in 10 minutes instead of sitting around in a courthouse for hours. So that's been a good thing. It saves the clients money. It's more efficient. I think it's easier on the judges to schedule that as well. I'm meeting with clients right now. All safeguards are intact in the office if a client's comfortable. If they're not comfortable, then we don't do it. But there are a lot more communications each day. I agree with the rest of the panelists that there's significant advantages to, as everybody gets used to Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or whatever other forum. I think there's going to be a lot more communication down the road.
Okay. So I guess the focal point of our panel is centered around a very interesting theme. And with each of you being a committed Jew, I guess maybe we could address how you address personally in your different roles the tension between the secular elements of your profession, such as the secular legal world, or the orthodoxies of the mental health profession, and the halachic Jewish elements present in marriage, counseling, divorce. Is there tension? How do you make the most of both of them? And did we want to, Rabbi Jachter, are you fine going first again? We'll just continue with the
we Jews have been dealing with this for 3,700 years. So I'm going to give a very rabbinic answer. I'm going to quote from the Chumash. This is Avram Avinu, our father Abraham already said, "Ger v'toshav anochi imachem." We Jews, we're strangers and we're residents. We know we have to have a foot in both worlds. That's who we are by definition. We have to be, we're a resident, we're part of the system. But on the other hand, we have our own orbit that we're proceeding in, and we're a stranger. But we're both at the same time. You could be two things at one time. It is a more sophisticated way of thinking. That's a more sophisticated way of functioning. We're able to be both.
Dr. Berger?
So it would appear that there are many issues that might potentially have a conflict between halacha and mental health. However, before one even gets to that point, I feel one has to ascertain, what are we talking about? Is the patient and the therapist on the same page, even in terms of religious observance? So I think that is a primary thing. But having once established that, I've given this a lot of thought over many years and have finally come up with what I think is a very meaningful conclusion. I am not a rabbi. Therefore, I don't give rabbinic opinions. Secondly, my job is not to tell a patient what to do. There are many contentious areas, just some of them are premarital sexual relationships, gay marriages, transgender orientation, to name just a few. But in those issues, what I always tell my patient is, consult your rabbinic authority. And if I have the opportunity, I would like to consult with that authority as well, so that we're on the same wavelength. In that way, I think there is no real conflict, but rather a smooth synthesis.
Robert?
I make it clear to all of my clients first. I'm a secular attorney. That's my job. That's where I'm licensed. That's my expertise. I have some knowledge of halachic law. I don't pretend to be an expert. I read books like right now I have in front of me Rabbi Warburg's book. This is how I gain additional knowledge. But the biggest part of my job and the biggest challenge, and probably where the most tension is to try to bring the client to a place where they understand that often they're trying to live in two different worlds. The initial gut reaction is, let me do it halachically the right way. Let me go to a bet din with any of my problems. Then the realities of what their particular situation comes into play. What is best for me? What is actually, in their opinion, I don't mean best for me, for the client. What is best for the children? There is a issue of perception. A secular court does not always, or generally does not understand what is going through Orthodox person's mind when they're discussing many of the issues. It's a lot to ask a secular judge to make a determination based on the husband being a black hat Orthodox practice and the other being modern Orthodox. It's a lot to ask them to understand that. Litigants assume, often in the Orthodox world, that everybody understands where they're coming from. Yeshivas where the mother might wear a shadel in one and they're not wearing it in the other. And these are very different worlds. Most people think everybody lives in their little world. And what they don't understand is that they really don't. Sometimes there's a strategic reason, as I mentioned before. Custody might be more favorable to one litigant in a secular court. It might be more favorable to one litigant in a beit din. So a divorcing couple, each person will have their own conflicts within their own world. They might want to go to a beit din, but then might decide to go to a secular court. We're going to discuss the issue of the arbitration agreement and the prenups in a few minutes. But there actually is a lot of tension with Orthodox families. The biggest crisis that I see, which often the rabbis come into play and then the mental health experts, is the initial guilt of wanting to appear before a beit din and wanting to do it the right way in our religion, but then understanding that the particularities of their situation really doesn't afford them the opportunity to get the results that they want.
So, so turning to the topic of divorce, do the three of you, in your distinct ways, how hard do you, I know Dr. Berger has already said he never tries to push a patient in a specific direction, but how hard would a rabbi, a lawyer, and a therapist fight to influence a client, particularly in terms of attempting to keep families together in a divorce situation?
I'll try first. If I could just comment one thing about about Mr. Kornitzer, our bias. Of course, the rabbi is always, it should be a beit din, unless you're dealing with a criminal matter. Once it's a criminal matter, it should not be in a beit din. That's for sure. There's no doubt. But otherwise, I think the most important thing to look for, in my opinion, is, and I'm eager to hear what the panel has to say about this. It's not so much about, well, what do you think the results are, but is it going to be a fair process that's going to be looking out in the best interest of the children? That's just a thought. We can bandy that about. I think personally, you have a proper bet din to deal with it, and it has to be a proper bet. And I don't necessarily recommend every single bet. You have to be very, very careful which bet din to choose. That you need to speak to your rabbi about guidance. Which bet din does he recommend? Which does he not recommend? And it's going to be important just to know what he does not recommend. But it should be, in my opinion, it should be a bet din. But let just to your question, Elizabeth, it's a very nice question. From a rabbinical point of view, it's an extremely difficult question to answer. It's a very, very fine line to know when there should be when a marriage stay together and when there should be a divorce. It's a very, very hard call. It's a very, very difficult call. And the bias certainly in the Jewish tradition is to avoid divorce. The Talmud tells us that the altar in the temple cries when the Tisha B'Av cries, literally cries. I can feel I'm a get administrator, and I do a lot. And in many of my cases, I can feel it. I can sense it in my soul. The mizbeach, the altar crying in the situation, the tragedy involved. Sometimes I get a sense that it's not necessary, and it's still happening. But nonetheless, it's in the Torah, divorce in the Torah, because sometimes it's necessary. It's a very, very difficult call to know when it should be when it should be avoided, when it's absolutely necessary. But people should realize that the impact on the children is profound. But also and if you're going to do it, if you're going to divorce, the way that you handle a divorce also has a profound impact on the children. Hopefully, the couple will be able to work together, collaborate, and not engage in an adversarial process. And always keep in mind the goal. The goal is the best interest of the children.
Dr. Berger?
So it's very interesting, Rabbi, because I'm going to address that issue. So clearly, in my opinion, for many reasons, if it is possible to get people to rehabilitate their marriage, of course, that would be the first choice. And again, I don't push people. My job is to help them see the benefit of staying together. But statistics are not really very favorable. In the general population, somewhere between 40 to 45% of all marriages will end in divorce. I also came upon an interesting statistic. I'm not really sure how generalizable it is, but within the Orthodox community, there is also a relatively high divorce rate, much higher than people believe. But divorce is obviously always a second consideration. But I would like to contribute to today's panel is that most people think that divorce and staying married have certain similarities. They don't. Even in a dysfunctional marriage, the children do suffer, but at least there is a nuclear family. And mommy and daddy may not like each other, they may not be good for each other, but to some degree, they're still functioning together. Divorce is very different. Divorce is like Baskin-Robbins ice cream. It comes in many flavors. There are good divorces, there are bad divorces. People don't realize that. Sometimes a marriage is untenable, and when that happens, at least, Rabbi Jachter, you would hope that the parents would work to the best interest of the children. That is what one would call a good divorce. But in reality, in my experience, it does not always happen that way. One of the most significant things that happens in divorce is that two people who started out loving each other can end up hating each other. And what happens is that divorce becomes a battle. It is a battle to win. And in any war, there is collateral damage. And in a bad divorce, the collateral damage is always the children. And I have to tell you that parents will talk about the best interest of the children. It doesn't happen, especially in what I would label a bad divorce. And I'm sure, Rabbi, you've come across that. Bob, you've come across that. So in those situations where rehabilitation is not even a question, my job is to actually mitigate the hatred that the parents have for each other impacting on the children.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think we lost Robert, but he might be coming back. I think he's trying right now. This charming hurricane outside is affecting us all, I believe. And I think, Robert, I don't know if you can hear us at all. I think his power was knocked off. So we might need to come back around to Robert unless he can hear us. Anything? Okay. Oh, are you there? Can you hear us? How's the weather down there? Maybe we'll move on to one more question and we'll try to get Robert's response back about.
But Elizabeth, can I jump in there?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
I think what Dr. Berger is saying is enormously important.
Okay.
That's really when a couple divorces, it's their responsibility to realize, you know what, we're gonna divorce. We're gonna make this a good divorce. It's their it's their responsibility, and hopefully they'll work with a talented therapist and with a proper attorney who's gonna really work hard. They're gonna really try to and go out of their comfort zone even to make sure that it's a good divorce and not a bad divorce. That's 100% correct. It makes a big difference. Makes a huge difference. And the collateral damage, you'll reduce the collateral damage. You will mitigate it dramatically if your goal is, let's make this a good divorce. But it needs two to tango. That's the problem.
Okay.
If I can sneak in a question to Mr. Kornitzer, if it's okay with you, Elizabeth, how do you do it? How do you make sure that it's going to be a good divorce and not a bad divorce?
How do you make sure?
Well, or do your best. How do you facilitate it? How do you do your best?
Well, first, let me just start with a basic premise. As many judges will say, I can order parties to do something, but I can't order them to agree. And that's the philosophy I operate under. In responding to, first of all, Rabbi Jachter, I do want to come back at you just from the last question, Elizabeth, if I can do that quickly. And that's choosing a bet din, which is a big issue, which
yes, it is.
becomes part of my whole process also. The forum, what I've noticed is the forum shopping of bet dins is amazing. I'm used to that. We're in Bergen County. If you live in Bergen County, if the other person lives in Passaic County, you can choose your county where you file first. But that's it. It's the same laws, at least. There might be different judges. There might be particularities within a county, but you're in the same system. With the bet din, and that's part of the major tension, is they are so different. And even the dayanim within a bet din, who is being chosen? Is this person attached to a yeshiva that my father-in-law is a member of, on the board? There is so much to consider when we're choosing a bet din, and most of the time they don't agree, and that's what stops that process in my experience. That one person wants to go to Bet Din of America, another one wants to go to Lakewood, and that's it. The conversation is over because each feels often that they have particular influence in one forum. That to me is the biggest problem and what keeps a lot of Orthodox Jews out of the Bet Din. Now going back to the question.
And we agree, and that is a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone realizes how big a problem. I think the attendance at a bet din would be many multiples of what it is now if there were more uniformity between the different bet dins and application. I don't know if it's possible. But
I think it's impossible, but at least if they sign the prenuptial, it's not happening. You get all the Jews to agree to do something that's not happening. But what I think the prenuptial agreement does address that. In other words, if you have the prenuptial agreement, it says you have to go to a particular bet din. That may be that may mitigate the issue. So you're not arguing with bet din. It says this bet din is where you're agreeing to go to, and that's it.
Okay. So back to the question of what do we bring in as far as what we try to tell clients at the beginning. I have my own particular way of doing things, and I don't know that it relates to many other matrimonial attorneys, to be honest. What I always want to know in my own head is that the couple knows what they're doing, and they're not just doing this as a spur of the moment, as an angry reaction to something. I always ask them first, have you gone to counseling at some point during the marriage? Have you seen your rabbi? Have you discussed it with people that you trust? You fully understand that it will have an impact on the children. It might be better for the children to be out of a dysfunctional household. But I just want to know that this has been a real thought out process. I will not try to influence them one way or the other. I will not say, you're a person that I really think should be divorced, or you're somebody that really doesn't fit the mold. If I believe it's somebody who really hasn't thought it out, I will send them away. I'll tell them to either get another attorney or to just try, speak to your rabbi, speak to your counselor, because you could tell if it's just somebody who's very angry at that moment, especially about something that happened recently. My mother came in, my husband disrespected me, and I can't take it anymore. And that to me, that's not a good reason to uproot your family. People don't always understand. They think that the process could just be reversed. You say, okay, you know what? I filed a complaint. It was a warning shot across the bow. Never mind. We'll just backtrack. Not easy process to backtrack. Once you head down this road, it takes there's an inertia of its own. Very hard to go back on that. So that's really, with me, the main thing. And it's just a personal thing, because I wouldn't want my children to make that decision with their marriages very quickly. And especially when there's children involved. I'm less strict.
Oh, no. Okay.
He was saying very important things.
Yeah, that was a great point. Okay. So, we'll try to get Robert back, but we're just gonna also, a couple of housekeeping points before we move on. We're going to move soon into the process of Q&A. So you're welcome to either raise your hand and ask a question. Our attendees may do that, or they can also submit the question in the chat at the bottom of the screen. And if you would like an additional level of anonymity for whatever reason, you're also welcome to email me at editors@jewishlinknj.com. That's editors@jewishlinknj.com. So please go ahead and you're welcome to start submitting questions. I'll try to, if it's okay, I'm not sure. Robert, are you with us? Maybe? Yes, no? All right. I think I'll move to another question and we'll try to.
Well, before you move, I would just like to make a comment to both what the rabbi said and what Bob said. See, there is an assumption that people think out divorce very logically. That is totally erroneous. Most divorces, in fact, are based on irrational emotional feelings. Because if people were more logical, there would be less divorces. And so we really have to take that into account.
Okay. Yes, for sure. And one of the things that I know was popular 15, 20 years ago when I got married, and also had, it's had rejuvenation and PR campaigns every so often. It's definitely a hot topic in the area of Jewish marriage, and that is the prenuptial agreement, the halachic prenup. Oh, I see Rabbi Jachter is applauding. So how exciting. We have this document in place within the Jewish community that many Rabbeim, I believe, try to ensure that marrying couples sign before they marry. We did have a brief conversation. Unfortunately, it does look like Robert dropped off again, but I think Robert had said this in our prep time yesterday, that there are differing levels of success with the actual ketubah being a document as well that should guarantee in some way the care of the wife and child or children of this particular marriage. But I guess, Rabbi Jachter, would you like to start in talking about how the prenuptial agreement, I believe the RCA has the biggest one that is the most well-known. Does that ensure a smoother process?
I'd like to say that my wife and I, 25 years ago, signed. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary in 2 weeks. We signed the prenuptial agreement. Our first child that got married, our oldest daughter, and our son-in-law, they signed it. So we might be the second generation RCA prenuptial agreement family. It's a no-brainer. I refuse to perform a wedding for couples without the prenuptial agreement. And I'll go out on a limb by saying I don't think there's no responsible rabbi in the world who understands what gets are about and what divorce is about. Even understands that a trifle should be Masada Kedushin, should officiate it at a wedding without their signing the RCA prenuptial agreement. It makes a world of difference. It makes a world of difference.
Dr. Berger, are you still with us? I'm sorry, I'm
I certainly am.
looking at some questions. Yes. So would you like to respond to the halachic prenup?
Well, again, I don't have smicha, so I don't jump into rabbinic issues. I do think, though, from a mental health perspective, a prenup is really an excellent idea in terms of the fact that you should always be aware when you start where you may end up. So that most people get married for the most flimsy of reasons. Think of yourselves of people you know. Most people get married because they fall in love. Well, a prenup is not falling in love. And I think it is really a very important balance to that.
Okay, thank you. Robert, are you back with us, maybe?
I'm back. I'm
Okay,
back.
great.
We keep losing power here, Wayne, New Jersey.
For sure. Our windows are also getting some big lashings on it as well, so you're not alone. But did you hear the question?
No.
Okay, so we turned to the topic of divorce. I don't know if you were ever given the opportunity to talk about whether you fight to keep families together or not. Were you?
Yes, that's what I pretty much finished.
Okay, great. And then, so the next question we were talking about was the role of the prenuptial agreement, and particularly whether the halachic prenup, which is put out in the last 20 years, 25 years by the RCA, and which Rabbi Jachter is a proponent of, whether that has a role in secular law, and whether that is a positive thing. Have you had an experience? Have you had experience with? Does this ensure a better process in any way?
Well, sometimes it confuses the process, but I mean, it sounds like I missed this with Rabbi Jachter, but there's the arbitration agreement, and then there's the prenup. And the prenup, the arbitration agreement obviously is a choice of forum or down the road. The prenup, my understanding is it really only covers the temporary support that will be paid initially when there's a separation. Rabbi Jachter, am I off on that?
It's not about the support. It's basically it's trying to motivate a husband or even a wife to give a get when it's appropriate to do so.
Okay, so with the get, unfortunately, that's not enforceable in the secular courts. You can agree to give a get in a prenup, but a judge cannot order the get in New Jersey courts. So that becomes a problem. When people hear the word prenup, part of my problem is maybe it's just a use of language, and maybe things need to be defined better. A prenup in the secular world means you're trying to define a lot of the rights and relationships down the road. Will there be alimony at all? Will there be division of property? What will happen to the family business that might have started in one family? A prenup really is a financial document that tries to outline what will happen in the event of a divorce. That's the prenup that we deal with.
And so just if I could predict what the first question would be, then is along the same lines. We have talked about the prenup serving as a specific protection against creating the situation of agunot. An aguna being someone who is chained, who cannot
I think we may have lost Elizabeth.
Might have. So I'll pick up on that situation. What a crazy day, isn't this? It's just amazing. Just add that to the year. With the prenup really doesn't protect in the secular court the aguna situation. One of people who know me know that maybe my biggest pet peeve is I will not represent a male who just unequivocally says, I will not cooperate with the get process. I find it to be the utmost, especially in the secular court, of Chilul Hashem. I don't think you could portray the Jewish population worse than taking that type of viewpoint and presenting it to a court where nobody understands where you're coming from. Whatever reasons an individual might have, and I understand there's halachically justified reasons for this. You could point to all kinds of infidelity. You could point to whatever you want to point to. It plays badly. You know, the Marid Ayin is hideous, and I think it just harms the perceptions of the Jewish community in general. I find it to be, frankly, a despicable act under any circumstances, because the male can pretty much go and do what he wants. There's certain limitations, but I think I'm somebody with 2 sons, 2 daughters, and I would never allow my sons to prevent a get, and I would never want my daughters in that position where they cannot move on with their lives, because there is significant financial leverage and sometimes custodial leverage that's placed on people in this situation. So to me, there really is nothing worse you can do in a case. I won't represent that person. That being said, the secular court cannot enforce it. So even if it's written in as part of the agreement, they cannot enforce it. That's a problem. And that's why as many measures as can be taken within the community, whatever could be done, I believe should be done, because I really believe that you're taking a bad marriage and you're bringing it to a place where it should never go. So I would like to say that the the prenup really protects you. Maybe within the Jewish community, it could put pressure on. Outside the Jewish community, it really can't.
But you see, you're making an assumption, which I don't make. And that is that people are always going to act in good faith. So somebody who comes to you and is not willing to give a get, for example, well, already that person is not dealing in good faith. Would you agree?
I would agree, but they don't agree, because there are halachic, the first thing they'll say to me is, I spoke to a rabbi, and that rabbi said, based on the circumstances surrounding our marriage, I want the marriage to continue. She doesn't want it to continue. She can't give good reasons. I am justified in withholding the get. See, that's what I'm saying. To that person, I've never had, it's another philosophy I have. I've never had somebody come into my office and say, you know what, Bob, I want what I want. I'm a bad person. I don't care. This is what I want. And I'm justifying it anyway. I can do it. I don't think I've ever seen somebody go into a court before a judge say, you know what, I don't care about anybody. I care about myself. This is what I want.
But you see, you're right. But actions speak louder than words.
Correct.
And the bad guy almost never acknowledges that she is the bad guy.
That's correct, but that's why it's unfortunate that a secular court cannot require a get. So even an agreement to do something doesn't mean you did it. There's a big gap in there. And especially when our halachic justifications, and the typical person will seize on those justifications. They will do that. And it's unfortunate, and to me, it's embarrassing in front of a secular court, but you know, it is what it is.
Okay. Hi, I'm back. Did you guys, was everything okay without me? Did anyone else lose power? Or I know Rabbi Jachter only lives like 3 blocks away from me. So is he, everybody still online?
Yes.
Hang in there.
All right. Okay, still there. So anyway, I guess I'm going to just move to the next question, which was just that which was, well, did you completely talk about Agunot already? Is the topic
to chime in, if it's okay with you.
Covered or no? Sorry about that. I really want to.
I'm going to chime in if it's okay with you. I would just want to talk about if, you know, we have to, Bob, we have to meet again for lunch for a second time. And we talk about the prenuptial, talk about a prenuptial agreement again. And my experience has been incredible with it, meaning that it's been introduced in 1992. My and other rabbinic courts, our experience is that we know of one case in the nearly 30 years that it's in operation where you have an aguna. And I just want to add one thing, by the way, with the bad guys, they're bad women too. I just want to add on, it goes both ways. Women can refuse to receive a get. And I have, you look at my docket over here, my docket is pretty long list of people that women who are refusing to receive gets. So, and the prenuptial agreement addresses both. And in my experience, it has been exceptionally effective. There is a case, and it was a case in Connecticut a few years ago, Light versus Light, where the prenuptial agreement actually was sustained in a civil court. And but in my experience in the real world, it's most likely the husband is not going to want to have this litigated in a civil court, and most likely it's going to just in experience, the prenuptial agreement has made a world of difference.
Well, I mean, understand where I'm coming from. It's a very small percentage of males who do that. You know, it's a juicy subject, and it carries a lot of traction to it. But in reality, whether or not there is a prenup, most men will agree to it. Most people cooperate. They do want to move on with their lives. So I don't know that your statistics as to, I don't know if there's a direct connection between the prenup and cooperating with the get process. I think the vast majority would do it anyway. Maybe it bumps them over the edge, but I think that the pressure within the community is likely to bump those people over the edge anyway to cooperate.
I just, bottom line, do not let your children marry without a prenuptial agreement. I told my daughter, you can do whatever you want, but I'm not showing up to the wedding if you're not signing the prenuptial agreement. She wanted to do it on her own. My daughter-in-law wanted to do it on his own. Baruch Hashem, they're great, they're wonderful. But I would just say, parents, rabbis, parents, you have to insist on it. It makes a world of difference.
And that's different from the secular prenuptial agreement, which is financial. And believe it or not, I'm not always in favor of those. I think sometimes it's necessary to protect family assets, to protect businesses. Often, I think it sets a bad tone for the marriage because you each have your own. That's a whole different issue. It's not a halachic issue. It's not just a Jewish issue. It's just a general observation that I've made that couples with prenups, I think, are more likely to have a less binding relationship because they will each have their own agendas and will each be looking to protect themselves. And unfortunately, when a prenup is upheld, the classic secular prenup, you will have a greater disparity between the financial situations of the parties at the end than in a typical marriage. But I just want to throw that in there because as popular as prenups are, and there's a lot of attorneys who say you need to do one before almost every marriage, a secular one, I think it decreases the likelihood of a good marriage. I really do.
I had that. One of our graduates from Torah Academy, where I'm a Rebbe, TBC, he asked me about 10 years ago, should he have, he's doing very, very well financially, exceptionally well financially. And he asked me, should he have a prenuptial agreement and to protect his assets because he's done exceptionally well. I said exactly like Bob was saying, marriage is a union of souls. And you don't want that wealth that you've accumulated with your talents and abilities and Hashem's help. You don't want that, in the words of King Solomon, of Shlomo Melech, you don't want it being Osher Shamur L'Ba'alav L'Raso. You don't want that money to come and boomerang and hurt you. And you don't want that prenuptial agreement to create a barrier that'll make a barrier of the union of souls. So that's, I am 100% in agreement with Bob.
And right. There are ways to protect yourself without that, by the way. Premarital assets, there's many ways to protect yourself.
And I think one of the questions that just came in, and then I did want to move on to the topic of mediation if possible, but a question that just came in was about where people can see that halachic prenup or any other recommended halachic prenup or non-halachic prenup, secular prenup. And so Rabbi Jachter, could you direct individuals to that, is it the RCA prenup? Is that on the RCA.org site, perhaps?
Yes, and it is a dedicated, right, it's on the Best in America website, but there's a dedicated website called theprenup.org. Theprenup.org, might be .com. The prenup, I think it's theprenup.org. And Google that. And there you're going to get your answer. I just also saw just in the chat that one of our attendees is asking a very important question.
Okay.
Well, maybe of parental alienation by one parent or another. My response is as follows. And this is what Bob was saying and Dr. Berger was saying as well. This is where the mistakes make. The mistakes happen is where a person makes decisions on his own. You need a panel to decide it. You can't just decide on your own that I'm going to take action. I'm going to decide what's right. I know what's right. That's what leads to disaster. And it works against the person. It works against it works against the children. And it is only self-defeating. By having the RCA prenuptial, you're submitting to the jurisdiction of a panel of people that can be objective and determine the proper course. You're gonna have one person deciding I'm right. You're biased. You're always going to be biased in your own favor. You need an objective panel to make that decision.
Okay. And then we did want to try to get in
an opportunity to discuss the very hot topic of mediation, and whether what the role of a mediator, as opposed to a lawyer, I guess, like Bob might take on as a role, but whether utilizing the services of a therapist, a rabbi, or someone licensed as a specific mediator might have a role in marriage, whether you see this as a trending topic or not. I'd like to know what all of you think about mediators.
So if I could take a shot at it, not everybody's a candidate for mediation, that's for sure. However, if you're not a candidate, but many people are, and if at all possible, much better than a beit-din, certainly better than the civil court, much better than a beit-din, is a trained professional mediator that can and sometimes they can be a therapist, but they should be a trained expert mediator. Can make a world of difference, and bringing out a process, a fairer, better process that's going to be in the best interest of the children. But again, not every couple is for this, but for many couples, this is an excellent option.
Dr. Berger?
So, and Bob, you just shout. But my experience has been that in a significant amount of divorce, the minute the two different people hire lawyers, the lawyers become professional gunslingers. And the lawyer's job is to tell their client what is the best deal, even if it's at the expense of the other person. To me, mediation has a totally different point of view. And what is really, I think, the best part of it is it strives for what I call a win-win solution. That is the only successful way, because if one person wins and the other person loses, they both lose, and vice versa. So I'm all for it.
Well, my approach is a little more complicated with that. So I handle a lot of mediation. I also do arbitration, and I'm a litigator. It depends, number one, on the mediator's approach. Some mediators will only have the approach that their job is to make a deal, not a fair deal, because you don't always want the mediator to be somebody who's telling you what to do. So think about it, if your job is to get a deal, are you going to move the brick wall, or are you going to move the feather? Where are you going to move? So there's generally one party that says, this is where I am, I'm not budging. So how does a mediator gain success? By always moving the other person. Problem with mediation, and again, I do a lot of mediation, and I recognize this in mediations that I handle sometimes. You don't always get a fair result. Sometimes you get a very bullied result because these people are not equal people. And that happens very frequently. The courts recognize this. They don't allow for the regular mediation when there's a domestic violence matter because they realize you're unequal bargaining positions. So the mediator has to either have two equal people or be unbelievably strong and make their role known that they're going to only allow a certain range of results in their mediation because they want it to be fair. That's number one. Number two is that people often start mediation prematurely. If, say, husband has a business, we'll give it a pizza business because that's your classic cash business, and he says, I earned $20,000 last year. I want everyone to accept that number and let's base everything we're doing on that. Well, till you get numbers in front of you, how do you know what the truth is? So who's going to tell you when you need the numbers? Your lawyer. A mediator has to send the parties to a lawyer at some point because they say, I need somebody to advise you of your rights because I, as the mediator, I'm not advising either of you what your rights are. I'm not telling you not only what's best for you, but what you're entitled to under the law, or what your children are entitled to under the law. So I think to take a simplistic view that mediation is always best, it really isn't. It depends on the situation. That being said, I start every single case. I tell my client, I want to have a four-way settlement conference. Me, you, your spouse, their attorney. I want to sit down in one room and let's see what we can work out together. You know, seasoned matrimonial attorneys, we know within a few percentage points where everything is going to end up. And we can sit down, we can say, here's the game plan. This is the information we're going to put together. Here's subjects we agree on. Often custody is the first subject people agree on because they have a way of their life and they love their children. And then you work on the other subjects. So to me, there is no one best method. But the only thing that I say is not the best method is to go to mediation before you know what your rights are under the law. And you've had somebody advising you. You could reject it all. You know, my job is to tell people what they're entitled to, what I think I can get for them. My job isn't to tell them what to do with their lives. If you have somebody who has never worked on their own and they say after a 40-year marriage, I'm waiving alimony, I want nothing to do with this person, that's their business, as long as they know what they're doing. I might send them to their therapist at that point to make sure that they're able to make decisions on their own. But I'm not telling them what to do. So there's no, one size fits all with mediation.
So there is a couple of questions that have come in. I'll just read one of them, and that is asking if any of you have experience with collaborative divorce as an alternative to litigation or mediation, employing a team with financial or mental health professionals as part of the team, which includes attorneys for each party. Is this a topic that you all want to address? Any of you? It doesn't have to be all of you. Maybe.
I'll throw in. I'll be the leadoff person. That's going to be that's going to be destroyed in I predict in a minute. But I've heard good things about it. If that would probably be the next best. If they're not candidates for mediation, and Bob is right, there are some the brick wall and the feather. That's a very good analogy. And you cannot have one side bully another side. That's intolerable. That's 100% right. But sometimes in a situation like that, if you have attorneys that are say at the beginning, say at the outset, we're agreeing, we're not going to litigate this. We're going to come. We're going to come together. We're going to collaborate on a fair result that's going to be win-win, to use Dr. Berger's term, very correct term. Then it can win. Again, not everybody. That's not perfect for everybody either. There's every situation is different. But it should at least be considered, and that's part of the education to consider. Is mediation an option? Is collaborative attorney an option? Maybe then you have to go to an adversarial process if that doesn't work. But at least be aware that for many people, for many couples, that actually collaborative law, from everything that I've been hearing in the last 30 years of being Masada and Get administrator. I do hear that sometimes it works. Sometimes.
Okay. Bob or Dr. Berger, did you want to?
Well, sure. I mean, the underlying underpinning of a collaborative divorce would appear to be that there is an implicit desire to do this collaborative as opposed to adversarial. So if in fact people are willing to sit down and do that, sure. And again, each case is different. That's a given, but we're talking in generalizations. So in a generalization, that is always a better approach than the other one.
I'm going to take the contrarian view here, and I'll tell you why. Collaborative law, let's have one with a big C and one with a little c. To collaborate, every attorney who's seasoned, who's a good attorney, will collaborate because that's in the best interest of the clients. Collaborating, I mean, you'll work to get the discovery together. You'll work with your client to do what's best for the children. best for them. But you'll work together so that you don't have to have a trial. Only 1 to 2% of all cases go to trial. So everybody else is collaborating. It might not be a smooth line, but they're collaborating to get to the end result. The problem with the big C, collaborative law, and that's where the attorneys and the experts have to bow out if there's no agreement, is number one, you're back to the brick wall and the feather, because you have one person who will not agree, and they can't be forced to agree. When that happens, and that happens frequently because I've had many clients come to me after collaborative law collapses. You've now spent a fortune. You can't use the same experts. You can't use the same attorney. You're starting from scratch, except you're a lot poorer and you're a lot angrier. And that's the big problem. So collaboration is a great word, but the collaborative law, the way it's used, that the lawyers cannot continue with you, the experts cannot continue, even a custody expert cannot continue. I think it's a very dysfunctional way, and it allows, especially if one person has deeper pockets than the other, it allows for some very bad results unless it totally breaks down.
Can I chime in? Is it okay? So I hear that response. I very much understand it, and it makes a lot of sense. Could you respond, Bob, to the following? In my experience, I've many times I've heard women or men tell me during the, again, my focus, I'm a get administrator, but people speak to me, they talk. And sometimes they'll tell me that they feel at the end, that sometimes they feel their worst enemy has been their own attorney. They feel that their attorney has been working just to serve their own needs. So how do we make sure that you don't have a situation in which the attorney is serving himself rather than the client? How do we address that in a way? So it would seem that with collaborative attorneys that it should avoid that, because it's set up, the system's set up for them to achieve some sort of a win-win situation, as opposed to a situation where as Dr. Berger was using it, gunslingers and sometimes far worse than gunslingers, the attorneys just trying to pad their own billable hours. How do you avoid a situation like that?
It's an excellent question. And a lot of it, well, sometimes you have certain attorneys that just is their nature. And they'll tell you that up front. They'll say, I'm there to beat up the other side for you. I mean, that's the way they start the process. I'm going to take a little different approach, though. I lay it on the client. I lay it out on the litigant. If you're coming to my office and you're saying, I want to get that person, I want to get back at them. They've abused me. They've made my life miserable. I don't want them to see the kids. I don't want whatever it is. People come in and they lay the groundwork a lot of times for an attorney if they're going to serve their client, because that's their job. The attorney's job is not to tell the client morally, or this is my preference, how you live your life. I don't tell you how to live your life. But if a client goes into an attorney and says, I want to litigate this, I want every penny that I'm entitled to, I want as much custody, I don't want him to get the kids overnights. If the litigant comes in that way, expect to get what you've asked for. And I always remind clients, are you sure this is what you want? Because if you take this approach, this is what can happen. You're forcing a custody evaluation, which might cost you $20,000. It might cost you $100,000 by the time you finish with everything going on and all the experts and going around, and you ruin your kids' lives. If you want every penny of equitable distribution, then expect this kind of fight. If you want every penny of alimony, or if you don't want the other person to get alimony, say, I've been telling her to work for 30 years and she hasn't done it, and darn it, now she's going to get nothing from me. Right. So, you know, litigants have to take responsibility for themselves. And at the very end, when there is a settlement, the judge's questions in an uncontested divorce, they're not asking, is this fair or not? They're not evaluating whether the alimony in an agreement is fair. All they're evaluating is, do you, the litigant, believe this is what you want? Is it fair? Is it acceptable? Do you understand what you're doing? At the end of the day, it's the litigant, what's in their own head, and whether it's acceptable or not, whether their goal is for their kid to be happy or for them to know that they got the best of the other spouse, maybe because their family is pressuring them to do it or for whatever reason. I think that, so people have to take responsibility as well. And I would say if the attorney's advertising is I'm the best gunslinger in the West, you're going to get what you ask for.
Right.
Bob,
Sorry, can I break in, because I think we have one last question and the individual has to leave. So I wanted to try to get in this question if possible. It was quite long and I only see half of it now, but basically the question, it's not about collaborative divorce anymore, but sort of going back to the issue of the ketubah and whether or not that document does or does not favor the husband, which I know is probably a controversial issue for you, Rabbi Jachter, and as well as everybody else, whether or not it is an open and shut case, kind of like a contract for in the secular world where, listen, hey, the husband fails to fulfill his responsibilities or violates them, and then they still can withhold the get even if he broke his part of their responsibility. Does the situation in general favor men? Does it disfavor women? And I guess who wants to respond to that? I guess.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I think that the ksuba is, and I think for sure the ksuba is instituted to actually protect wives, but it has to be supplemented in the United States with the RCA prenuptial agreement. The ksuba plus the RCA prenuptial agreement is going to be fair. It doesn't favor the man, doesn't favor the woman. It favors a fair process and a fair result.
So basically the dual goal of both the ketubah combined with the halakhic prenup provides an additional layer of protection.
100%. And any rabbi does not perform a wedding without a ksuba. No rabbi in the world, no rabbi in the United States or outside of Israel should perform a wedding without the RCA prenuptial.
Dr. Berger, I think we cut you off earlier because I wanted to get the question in. Did you have something you wanted to respond to?
The only thing I wanted to add is this. But you see, Bob, it's not an equal contest, because when a person comes to a lawyer, they know nothing about the law, and they put all their faith into the lawyer. So you and I both know that there are good lawyers and there are not good lawyers. I don't know what the percentages are, but I certainly have encountered both. And so when you say the ownership of which way the divorce goes is a function of the litigant, maybe if they are intelligent enough. But my hunch is many litigants are not, and they wouldn't even know where to begin. So I think that one of the characteristics of a good lawyer is that of a counselor, which is what you attempt to do. But not all lawyers are counselors. And I think the average layperson is clueless and ill-equipped to make that decision.
Dr. Berger, you are 100% accurate. And it's unfortunate, and it's not, you don't like knocking people in your field. There's good therapists, there's not so good therapists. And there's rabbis who have their own agenda. There's rabbis who cater to the community more in all fields. A litigant really needs to research who is representing them. And often you really do need, while you don't want interference with your representation of a person, family is very important. The people around them can be very important because it gives them perspective. It allows people to see things that they just can't see themselves. You know, those extra sets of eyes sometimes could be a nuisance to some attorneys. Don't like any other viewpoints coming in because it might interfere with how they feel they're running the case. To me, I welcome it because I want my client to have as much comfort that they're doing what's best for them and their family. And Dr. Berger, it's an excellent point, and it's a sore spot. I wish there were more training to be. You need smicha to be a rabbi. You get some training. For a therapist, a lawyer needs training, but not in family law. Anybody could say, I do family law. It's very easy. The forms are online. You don't even have to buy a book with that. And it's a big problem, quite frankly, in the industry that I've found.
Bob, I have a suggestion. I think you and I should write a book, How to Choose a Lawyer.
Rabbi Jachter, you're going to collaborate?
I'll participate. Right? Yeah, we'll
Yes, you're going to collaborate.
All right. Well, I think we're coming toward the natural end of the conversation, though I feel like we could go on longer, but it is after the hour, top of the hour, and I think some people had to log out. So I'll just say thank you to everyone who participated and everyone who asked questions and listened in. Do any of the panelists want to make any kind of final comments or thoughts? I think we'll have maybe some contact information. I don't think we have a screen to put that up, but we can follow up with emails because people RSVP'd. But anyone want to say anything else in conclusion?
Could I throw in something? Okay.
Yeah.
To try to strengthen yourself psychologically, and to try to put yourself into be a psychological, always improving yourself psychologically, whether that's with a therapist or with self-help options, however it does, always a whole life working to strengthen yourself psychologically. I think when you're psychologically strong, and spiritually strong, I should say as a rabbi as well, you're psychologically and spiritually strong, the two go together. It's really in everybody's best interest.
I'll second that.
Right. All right. So thank you everyone for your time. I think that we will log off, and thank you everyone for participating, and please everyone stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well, Elizabeth. Thank you for taking your time to do this.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for organizing this, Mr. Kornitzer.
My pleasure. It's been very enjoyable.